All right, so I got the John Deere 3025e here back at home, and we're gonna do some maintenance on it. First thing I'm gonna do is take the leaf blower, blow off all the debris. This thing's pretty dust covered here, a lot of leaves and debris. Then I'm gonna wash it down just because it's nice to work on something that's clean and not have dirt fall in your face. So it's been 3 years, just about 3 years since I've had it home here. So the oil has 3 years on it. Not so many hours, I think only about 100 hours on the oil, which I think is fine. I'm also going to do the fuel filters just because I think that was done the same time the oil was, and we got it here, so we're just going to do everything while it's at home here. I'm also going to do the front axle. I've never done that before, but I know there were some questions about how to do it. It's pretty straightforward. It doesn't look like there's that much to it. So let me get this thing blown off, washed, and then we'll come back and start some of the maintenance. All right, so I just left it run here for probably 45 minutes to get the oil warm. It takes a really long time. And I'm gonna drop the oil. I'm not sure we're gonna do the front axle on this video. The parts manager was giving me conflicting information from what the owner's manual said. So he was saying it uses high guard, and the book says it should use high guard low vis. So I'm going to check with a different dealer. They didn't seem like they were too in tune with what they were doing. So we'll get set up here to drop the oil and we'll go from there. Alright, so on the right side of the tractor here's going to be your oil fill. We need to remove that. I kind of wiped around it just to keep the dirt from getting in there. And you can see the dipstick in the screen as well. It's going to be this yellow loop down in here. We'll get that from the bottom. And then right next to that is going to be the filter. So the last time it was changed was 2019. It had 90 hours on it. Okay, so let's remove this drain plug. Wow, that's tight. Okay, so we're going to take the coffee container here and slide this out of the way so we can use the wider catch for the oil filter. And we'll dump the large container before we splash around with that oil filter. Alright, so I loosened up the filter with a filter wrench because it was pretty tight. And you can see this ground lug here gets covered with oil. I'm going to try a piece of very thin cardboard here to try to direct it to the correct location without getting it spilled all over everything. We'll see what happens, if that works or not. Well, alright. So far so good. Oh yeah, long threads here. That's right. There we go. Oop. Huh, that worked pretty good. I'll just leave that like that and let that drip. Alright, so I got the filter surface there all cleaned up. The filter we're using is going to be a John Deere filter. And the part number is M806419. And the lawnmower, the X758, uses a 6418. So it's a little bit smaller. You'll also notice that this O-ring or gasket on here is kind of beveled. I wasn't sure when I took the, or when I looked at the new one if that was the same, but I looked at the old one I took off and it's exactly the same. So we'll throw this one on, and looks like we're done draining, so we can put the plug back on as well. Alright, so I got the drain plug back on. I couldn't find a torque spec, so it just says do not over tighten in the book. Anyway, so the oil I'm using is the 0W40 by John Deere, and it's got the CK-4 designation. It takes 1.2 gallons or 4.8 quarts, and I have 2 gallons because the dealership does not have any quart containers of the 0W40. He told me the soonest he would have a quart container would be July. He also told me that if they don't find a different manufacturer for their filters before June, they're not going to have filters anymore. So they're having some issues with supply chain, I guess. So anyway, this will make things interesting. We'll dump in the first gallon, and then we'll have to just like little by little fill it up so we don't overfill it. Right, one thing I should mention is the price of this oil from the dealership was $44. So it's not inexpensive, but I think it's probably pretty close to in line with any type of 0W40 synthetic. I don't know, you could look at like a Shell Rotella and see, but I'm willing to bet that's got to be pretty close. Right, for filling the oil, I just have a yellow funnel here, put in the oil fill, so this should make things easy. Alright, so we'll take a look at the air filter here, and the easiest way to do that is to take this bungee cord here that kind of holds the whole works down. You just take that off, and then you can swing the whole thing up. This should be okay, or not. Thought it was going to be okay. So this looks pretty dirty actually, and this was changed 3/18 with 52 hours. It's actually pretty brown. I don't know if that came from using the rotary cutter and making all the dust, because that makes a ton of dust. Even this inner one here, this one looks kind of, it should be like a nice bright blue. It's pretty brown. So I'll have to go back and get some filters the way it looks, because I don't like the way that looks. So we're going to replace the filters as well. So I'll get those parts. I got the oil filled up. We'll check that in a second. And I went through, I greased all everything that needed to be greased on the loader and the tractor, so we should be good there as well. Alright, so just for comparison, to get an idea of what they look like, the filter is actually pretty dirty. And then this is the inner filter there. That one's actually, looks almost like saturated. So we'll get those switched out, and like I do with all of them, I always put the hours and then the date that it was changed. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the old filter to work and see if we have one at work that matches that. The air filter box that this goes into says Donaldson on it, and Donaldson is a filter manufacturer. So that looks like a pretty common filter we use at work on a couple different types of applications. So it wouldn't surprise me, just if I could get a cross-reference so I don't have to always buy a John Deere filter. Alright, so we're going to tackle this filter here. So I got a paper cup that we're going to drain the bowl there, just to see if there's any water or debris, that type of thing, and hopefully we can look at it. First thing I'm going to do is turn this off, and that should stop the, I believe this is the fuel coming from the tank here. And we'll open this sediment bowl here, which is leaking. So I asked the parts guy at the dealer to get me the O-ring that goes on the bottom of this. So when we take this all apart, we'll inspect that O-ring and get that changed. So this should be draining out here at any point, or not. Well, it's supposed to come out the bottom there. This cup's gonna get pretty full. I think we'll be alright. We'll get all the rest of that off-road fuel dye out of there, hopefully. There we go. And I think that's it. Alright, so let's take the rest of this off here. So we got this retaining ring here, and that should be the cup. And that filter there I actually got, even though it looks like you can just clean that up. But he did say they had issues with those, I guess, which I don't know how you could have an issue with that. It looks like it's just a strainer basically. So I thought this was like a water separator, but I don't know, this to me just looks like a strainer. And this is, ooh, there's some garbage on that, I guess. Huh, yeah, some fines the way it looks. So we'll get that pulled out of there, and we'll go from there, I guess. Alright, so that's what I took out of the sediment bowl, and I believe most of that was in there. I might have bumped some of that stuff in there, but looks like it was doing its job there. Let's look at the strainer. Alright, so here is the fuel strainer, I guess. I don't know, I think they call it a filter element, but doesn't look too bad. That could probably just be cleaned up. He did say they had problems with them clogging, so he's like, it's best for the $4 just to replace it. So that's what I'm doing. Maybe that was an upsell technique. I did tell him on the drain here I need that O-ring, which he had a heck of a time finding. He was trying to tell me that there is only one O-ring, and I said, well, on the drain there's also an O-ring, and it's always dripping. So this is the O-ring for the actual, like the bowl here goes on there, and then the O-ring he got me for this was that, which is way too big. So we'll just make a third trip to get the correct O-ring exchanged here. I don't know, I might just put it back together for now and see what I can do. I don't know why that's such an issue getting that. You would think that would show in their parts, but let's get this put back together, and we'll go from there. I believe this red piece that sits inside this must float if you have water, and if it's floating, well, then you need to drain it. I believe that's what that is for. Alright, so I got everything assembled here. I got the O-ring on top, looks like that, and then this strainer, there's like a spot on the bottom. I cleaned up this retaining ring, and I put a little bit of fuel on that O-ring, so hopefully we can get this together without too much issue here. Let's see what happens. This should fit up in here. There we go. You can kind of tell it looks like there's something else that's got just a little bit of a leak here. Everything is kind of covered in dirt, so something's leaking that the dirt is sticking to it. And this wasn't very tight. I just took this off by hand. You don't need to go crazy He-Man on this because it is just plastic. And there again, if you think it's leaking, you can always give it a little bit more of a turn. As for the drain here, we're just gonna reuse that O-ring for now. It's been leaking before. I guess it's just gonna continue to leak for now. I might take it out after, run it to the dealership, but right now I'm not interested in going back to the dealership for a third time, I guess. So we'll turn our fuel back on. It'll start to fill. It might get airlocked actually, so we might have to open this to get it to drain a little bit here. Well, now it's draining out of there real nice. Why wasn't it doing that before? Huh. Yeah, that's just gravity flow. So what we might have to do is take off the one fuel line here and just let the air out so we can get that full. We don't want to airlock it. So we'll do that next. Alright, Alright, so I got everything assembled here. I got the O-ring on top, looks like that. And then this strainer, there's like a spot on the bottom. I cleaned up this retaining ring and I put a little bit of fuel on that O-ring. So hopefully we can get this together without, without too much issue here. Let's see what happens. And this should fit up in here. There we go. You can kind of tell it looks like there's something else that's got just a little bit of a leak here. Everything is kind of covered in dirt, so something's leaking that the dirt is sticking to it. And this wasn't very tight. I just took this off by hand. You don't need to go crazy He-Man on this because it is just plastic. And there again, if you think it's leaking, you can always give it a little bit more of a turn. As for the drain here, we're just gonna reuse that O-ring for now. It's been leaking before. I guess it's just gonna continue to leak for now. I might take it out after, run it to the dealership, but right now I'm not interested in going back to the dealership for a third time, I guess. So we'll turn our fuel back on. It'll start to fill. It might get airlocked actually, so we might have to open this to get it to drain a little bit here. Well, now it's draining out of there real nice. Why wasn't it doing that before? Huh. Yeah, it's just gravity flow. So what we might have to do is take off the one fuel line here and just let the air out so we can get that full. We don't want to airlock it. So we'll do that next. Okay, so after further review, I believe that this is a breather here. So this is the out of the filter. So if we pulled this off, that would let the air out. But this here looks like it's the high point here. So if we take that out, the fuel coming in here should have, this is just gravity flow from the tank. This should fill because we're letting the air out here. And when I was in the National Guard, we had a lot of trucks like that too, where there were breathers you'd have to open when you did filter changes. So I'm kind of thinking that's what this is for. And that's exactly what it's for. Look at it go. And so if this is right, we should let this go until fuel starts pouring out of there. And once it does that, all the air should be out. There you go. So that's what that's for. That's like a, not a breather, but I don't know. You open it up to get the air out of the system. So I looked at that and I was like, wait a second. It's been a minute. I'll be honest. It's been a minute since I've been in the Guard, and that was some older equipment we were working on with filters and stuff. All right, so this spin-on fuel filter we're going to try to get off here. I did put my big channel lock 420 on that to break it loose. I don't have a filter wrench that size. It's still extremely snug. I also should note, I turned the fuel back off again. It shouldn't matter, but I'm going to do it anyway just in case. And this looks like we'll probably make a little bit of a mess here spinning this off. And this one again was changed 318 at 52 hours, and we're at 161 hours now. Yeah. I'm getting fuel all over everything here. There shouldn't be too much above the filter. It should just be what's in the filter. A little bit of crust. Alright, so we're going to spin the filter back on. I did pre-lube the filter, so I filled it up with fresh diesel fuel I just got from the gas station. And I cleaned the mating surface and put just a little bit of diesel fuel on the O-ring as well. So apply fuel to surface of gasket before screwing. We did that, tightened to 20 to 24 Newton meters or 1 turn. Start engine check for leaks. Usually it's one turn after it makes contact, so there's contact. You can just turn it one full turn, and usually you'll never get it that much because it's usually pretty tight. You'll have to put a filter wrench or something on it to get it, especially if your hands are all covered with diesel fuel. So we're gonna start with it there, and we'll see how it goes. Alright, so before we try starting it, let's just cycle the key a couple times, let the fuel pump do its thing, and let's see what it sounds like. Okay, so let's start it up and see how we do here. So we should have all the maintenance done with the engine. So the other thing you should probably check would be the wheel bolts, lug nuts, whatever you want to call them. These look like they're bolts. So you're going to need a 22 millimeter, and these get torqued to 103 foot-pounds. The torque spec could be different depending on your tractor. If you look underneath the hood, mine gives the torque spec. I did try to put like a SAE socket on here, and that was definitely a no-go. 15/16 was too loose, 7/8 would not go. So 22 is the size, and these are marked with a metric marking. Alright, so tire pressure. Front tires, according to the owner's manual here, takes 35 psi if it's an R4 tire, which this is. The tire states that it'll take 340 kPa. And that is, I think, roughly 50 psi. I'm not sure why it's always marked in kPa, but I know like our backhoes and stuff at work are the same way. You always got to do a conversion or whatever. Also, this 35 psi that they have listed, that might be just for the tractor. If you have a loader, they may want you to put more air in the front tire. Might want to check your loader manual as well to see if it says to up the tire pressure. Obviously you got some room in there. Alright, so for the rear tires, you're looking at a 20 psi for an R4 tire, which this is again. The maximum pressure the tire says, and it has it in kPa and psi, is 35. It says never to exceed that. If you do have your tires loaded with either like a, what is it, sodium chloride or rim guard, beet juice, that type of thing, you might want to put your valve stem to the top before adding air, just so that if you try putting it in, it doesn't spew any of the goodness out. So before we put any air in these, I'm going to make sure that I got my valve stem at the 12 o'clock position. Also, to check the lug nuts on this rear tire here, I got to pull these weights off, which is going to be kind of a pain, but it uses the same lug nut or wheel bolt as the front. The torque is the same. It's 103 foot-pounds, just like the front. One of the other things I did, and this really isn't a maintenance thing, but just to kind of keep the paint looking nice, I cleaned up these side panels, gave it a light buff, and then put a coat of wax on it just to kind of keep it looking good. There are a few minor scratches, but it turned out pretty nice. It was actually pretty dirty. I took out quite a bit of stuff, and now it's got a nice shine to it again. I did that with both sides. Alright, again, under the hood here, this is where I get most of the information here, and you can always verify it with the owner's manual as well. But it's got the capacities of your major components, and then it also has a service interval, which is kind of like a quick reference so you don't have to go get the book. Alright, so we're going to wrap it up. That'll be the last of the maintenance that I'm going to do in this this video. The one thing I didn't get to was the plastic here. There's some scratches from getting on and off. I need to find a plastic polish of some sort that I can use that won't ruin the glossiness of the plastic. I know that John Deere says right in the book you got to be careful with even washing this, because you'll get like fine scratches in this. So we'll have to find a plastic polish to use on that. So other than that, that'll be it for now.